Avi Loeb's here.
We're going to, there he is.
Avi, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. A lot of things are happening and
So
we
much.
can get to them. Yeah.
Yes, if we could.
What's the
That'd be great.
latest, sir? Tell us what's going on.
Well, the International Asteroid Warning System Organization decided to monitor 3IAtlas between November 27th and January 27th with a high cadence, coordinating observations throughout the globe. And that is a very positive development because I recommended it. This is an organization that is associated with the United Nations, and I wrote a white paper that I submitted to the United Nations a couple of weeks ago, saying that we should examine interstellar objects that could be a potential threat to Earth, and it would be good to get as much data as possible to check whether the object maneuvers in any suspicious way or perhaps releases mini probes that may arrive at planets like the Earth. And so I'm very glad that data will be collected so we can figure out the nature of this object. In addition, we have additional data that was reported just over the month of September. It was imaged. The object was imaged, and we could see that the previous anti-tail, that was a jet of glow that was pointed towards the sun, 10 times longer than it is wide, first identified clearly by the Hubble Space Telescope on July 21st. It was pointing in the opposite direction to cometary tails that are pushed away from the sun, usually by the radiation pressure and the wind from the sun. This one was a jet pointed towards the sun. It wasn't clear what its nature is, and it appeared during July and August. And then in September, we started seeing, based on new data, the tail, the anti-tail, the jet towards the sun, changing direction to away from the sun. So the question is why? And of course, one possibility is that the sun-facing side is releasing ices that evaporate, so they never get to live long enough, those fragments of ice, in order to be pushed behind the object the way that we find in comets. But somehow, as the object got closer to the sun, the nature of the outflow coming off it changed. And that would be a natural origin for that. But there is also a possibility, if you imagine the gases coming out of 3IAtlas having a technological origin, perhaps the object is preparing to do some kind of a maneuver and changes the outflow. I mean, at the moment, obviously, it would be most natural to assume that it's a comet of natural origin, but we should keep our eyes and check what it does. And just before that image was released, or several images were released over the month of September, there was an image from August showing clearly an anti-tail that is pointed towards the sun. So this happened recently. And we're still waiting for an image from the highest resolution image that we can get from the HiRISE camera on board the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter that observed the object when it was closest to Mars. It was within 30 million kilometers from Mars on October 2nd, 2025. And the claim is because of the government shutdown, NASA is unable to release those images, which I find surprising because, the principal investigator of that camera, is a professor at the University of Arizona. There should have been a release of the data to the scientific community, irrespective of whether the communications office of NASA is active or not. This is a matter of science, not of public relations. And in fact, it's not good for public relations because the European Space Agency released an inferior data set from a camera they had that was only 13.5 centimeters in diameter, whereas the HiRISE camera is 50 centimeters in diameter. So the HiRISE image is supposed to give us the crispiest image of 3IAtlas with a pixel resolution of 30 kilometers. And that is better by a factor of 3 than the image we received from the Hubble Space Telescope, for example. So I'm really very eager to see it, but we have to wait.
Abhi, real quick, if we could talk about a little more with where the object is in relation to, it's almost at the point of reaching its closest point to the sun. And when that date happens, do you have any advice for folks about, what they need to plan on doing? I think that would be good.
Yeah, so on October 21st, that was a couple of days ago, it was in solar conjunction relative to Earth, meaning exactly on the opposite side of the sun. So if you were looking at the sky that day and seeing the sun up there, you can imagine 3IAtlas just behind it, perfectly behind it, so we can't observe it for sure. And we can't observe it throughout the month of October, actually, because it's so close to the sun, perhaps for a reason. If it was trying to avoid us noticing that it releases mini probes or doing some maneuver, that would be the perfect timing. Because when it comes closest to the sun, it moves at the fastest speed. And then if you want to get a thrust from an engine, that would be the perfect timing, because if you get the thrust in the direction of motion, then you gain the biggest amount of kinetic energy. Or if you do it in the opposite direction, you slow down a spacecraft. And we all know about it. This is called gravitational assist from a massive object like the sun. And so this week is the perfect timing for 3IAtlas to do that. And we can't look at it from Earth. Actually, that is a conjunction that was on 21st of October, but then a week later, 8 days later, it's actually arriving closest to the sun. And at that point, it will be at about 203 million kilometers from the sun. It will get of the order of 100 gigawatts of power on its surface from sunlight. So that will be the hottest point in its journey. And we don't know what will happen. If it's a natural comet, it could, for example, disintegrate, break up, evaporate much more. So we can learn much more about it. If, on the other hand, it's technological, it will behave differently. And so we really want to watch it immediately after that. And in the first week of November, there is the JUICE spacecraft that was launched by the European Space Agency that could potentially get close to it and observe it. And then it will be closest to Earth actually on December 19th. So it's interesting that, October 29th, when it's closest to the sun, is near Halloween. and December 19th is just a week before Christmas. So the question is, will it deliver anything unusual on those holidays?
Now, Avi, one thing we just wanted to get into a little bit, just on some of the scientific community maybe saying that it's premature to start having these discussions, saying this is possibly intelligent life out there doing that, and really trying to kind of cool the jets on any predictions like that. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the process of the questions that you're asking and how important that is right now in science.
Yeah, so one thing to realize is that the answer to this question has implications for the future of humanity. And just think about black swan events that the intelligence agencies have to deal with. These are events that are low probability, but the implications could be huge. For example, October 7th was not anticipated by the Israeli intelligence agencies, and lots of people died as a result. And so it's really important to consider seriously events that you think have a low likelihood but would have major implications. And in this case, alien technology could affect the future of all of us. And therefore, we must consider it seriously. Even though we haven't encountered it before, we just don't know how much traffic there is, because only over the past decade we started detecting interstellar objects. We didn't have telescopes that can do that before. And so I suggest that we will monitor each and every interstellar object, especially those that have anomalies. In fact, 3IAtlas has 8 anomalies. It's very big. It's at least 1,000 times more massive than previous interstellar objects. It's also in the plane of the planets around the sun. And, the chance of that happening at random is 1 in 500. It showed the unusual composition, only 4% water. It has nickel with very little iron, the way that the industrial production of nickel alloys appear. It also appeared from the same direction as the WOW signal that was detected in 1977. So there are definitely a lot of reasons for us to consider it seriously. The chance of all of these anomalies coming together is 1 in 10 to the power 16. Like each of them has a percent level or less than a percent likelihood, and there are 8 of them. It's really a small probability that we will see all of these anomalies. I'm not saying it's necessarily alien tech, but I do recommend that you take your vacation early rather than later, because our
Maybe
life
too late.
interesting.
I knew Avi was going to get me with some math before we were
PTO
done.
might not be approved by then.
And then he threw that equation at me, and my brain just about exploded. Avi, we got to go real quick. Is there a date we should know, yes or no, on this, or what it is?
Yeah, I believe that by January we should have a good idea about the nature of the object.
Love having you here, Avi Loeb. You're the man.
Harvard professor Avi Loeb.
Thank you,
Appreciate
sir.
it. Big things to come. We'll talk to you soon.